Chapter 1, 2015. It is good to have an end to journey toward, but it is the journey that matters in the end. Ernest Hemingway. Stars glimmered in the dark of the early morning when Andy's voice whispered in my ear, "Let's get up and row." His excitement was palpable. Rolling off our camping mattress, I felt my knees grind into some stones under the tent floor. I moved gingerly as I dressed in shorts, a t-shirt, and a sweatshirt to ward off the California morning chill. We walked with our carbon fiber oars over our shoulders and life vests on down the steep dirt hill to the beach, only 50 yards away. It was not yet fully light out. The sand felt cold on my feet and the ocean waves lapped gently at my ankles, waking me up. High tide made it easier to push our 18-foot blue rowing boat from the sand into the water. I secured the oars and climbed into my seat, holding the boat steady. Andy stood in the water holding the stern, and when the moment came, he put one foot into the boat, pushed offshore with his other foot, and twirled his body in a balletic move that landed him on his seat. The first oar strokes were mine alone, while he got his feet situated in the straps. I felt connected to the oars as they penetrated the water. My own muscle power pulled them through, our boat gliding forward toward the open ocean. Shortly, Andy began rowing too, matching my rhythm. With double the power, we shot across the bay and into the wild waters. Breathe in, breathe out, legs, back, arms, legs, back, arms was our rowing mantra. We passed natural caves that burrowed into the island and cruised over a reef. Our craft rode high in the water. We watched as blue and golden fish weaved through the tall kelp forest, then passed into deeper waters. Pelicans flew above us. Sea lions draped over the last buoy, barking their mournful cries. Water splashed as one of them rolled off the buoy and into the sea. Now we were in the open ocean, a half-mile out, following Catalina Island's undulating topography. On a lucky day, a seal might pop up and swim alongside for a while. Occasionally, we'd ship the oars and float together, taking in the extraordinary reality of this moment. Was this a dream? No. Andy was 11 years into his Parkinson's disease experience. His 7 years of being entirely disabled were over. Motorboats love to zip up to us and inquire, "Is that as fun as it looks?" That morning, a giant double-decker yacht came close, its engine purring and its owner standing on deck. "I used to row like that in the mornings, and it was the very best part of my day," he said. We smiled at him, and Andy gave a thumbs up. "I got old, though," he went on. "You are lucky you are young and healthy enough to still do that." Andy was 70 years old, and I was 58. I was 47 when Andy showed the first symptoms. The early stages of his disease were relatively mild physically. I learned that the really early stages included depression and lack of motivation, which Andy had presented for years. When Andy was diagnosed with Parkinson's, we had already been struggling financially for a while. My life had spiraled, setting me on a busy and difficult path. I was responsible for Andy's care, which increased each week, and juggled that with being the breadwinner, as well as making time to be mom to fledgling adult children. My busyness actually kept me a step or two ahead of my fear and removed me from fully feeling the losses I was experiencing. The strategy of not looking too far ahead worked very well for surviving difficult pieces of our life. It protected me. Living in the present moment is usually an act of deepening one's attention, but I used it as a distraction. Being an optimistic person and having the ability to tap into joy amidst suffering, it was an easy leap for me to pass over the depths of my own pain and despair. If I was able to live in a way that kept me from feeling that pain, then did it ever really happen? We had not been able to afford health insurance for 20 years. Ever since healthcare in our country had been taken over by private for-profit insurance companies around the 1970s, our income did not allow us that luxury. When Andy was diagnosed, we were completely shut out of that system because he had a pre-existing condition. I recognized that my days working were going to have to become longer and more intense. I faced a loss of equal partnership with my husband. Our children were beginning to strike out into the world on their own, and our daughter was beginning her first year of college. They were going to have to live their lives without the support we craved giving them. Since Andy's disease was incurable, I faced the fact that we would never be able to afford medical care. There was no one to ask for help. My family didn't offer. Friends didn't know I needed it. I felt alone. I focused on what we could do rather than what we couldn't. This way, my fears became manageable, and my life became about simply putting one foot in front of the other. One of the first major losses the disease brought us was when Andy told me he could no longer safely work with the torch to make his share of the bronze jewelry we sold. I was suddenly responsible for making all of it on my own. I laugh while writing this now because the pressure I felt then was nothing compared with what was to come. After Andy stopped all torch work, he could only use his right arm. We adapted. Andy was still able to polish our jewelry. He could get around all right because of his ingenuity and willingness to accommodate his lessened abilities, but everything he did was a lot slower. Eventually, even the polishing became difficult for him. So Andy taught me the process, and I added that to my list of responsibilities. We lived the first couple of years with the disease, hoping it would disappear. I had anxiety about the possibility of Andy's right side eventually tremoring too. I would surreptitiously check him daily because if that ever happened, I knew our life before Parkinson's would be completely gone. When his right hand, arm, and side finally did start tremoring, Andy heroically tried and failed to adapt again. We went out to dinner occasionally. Andy would sit on his left hand to appear more normal. He'd eat standing up at our counter so no body part would touch the plate or bowl, and he'd brace his arm against the wall, trying to quiet it enough to bring food to his mouth. Walking became difficult and then dangerous. Andy was a lifetime runner, and a gorgeous national forest trail began steps from our home. We had run there together for many years. One day, Andy took a walk on that trail and returned limping, accompanied by a neighbor who had found him on the ground. He had broken his scapula after falling and had not been able to get up. Andy stopped brushing his teeth altogether because he often hurt his mouth with his toothbrush. He stopped driving. These activities of daily living and his inability to do them were losses we absorbed. The rate of loss seemed to be at about one thing per week for a very long time. The life we had built together was dismantled piece by piece. By the time I turned 50, Andy's symptom progression was excruciating and relentless. The amount of his care that fell to me felt overwhelming, but I kept putting one foot in front of the other, the only way I knew how to cope. Each morning I took care of my own needs as well as Andy's. I didn't enjoy shaving him or cutting his nails, but helping him dress, preparing his mouthwash gargle, and brushing his hair were more enjoyable to me. Was I developing preferences of these mundane tasks because they were the only way I could have any say about something that was not optional in my life? I missed everything about our life before Parkinson's. I missed having an independent husband who could make his own choices. I missed our runs and hikes together. I missed being more equal. I missed going out together for dinner or a movie. I missed working together. I longed for my husband, best friend, and father of our kids to be well. My longing sometimes showed up in unattractive ways, like jealousy. In an unguarded moment, driving with a friend and their spouse, I said, "It has been devastating to no longer be able to be a team with Andy." "Really? Well, Beverly and I are a team in every aspect of our life together, aren't we?" the spouse replied. He looked at her, smiling happily. Fortunately, I was in the back of the car, and they couldn't see my tears. I was jealous. I was also ashamed to feel that way. I tried not to have unguarded moments. There wasn't anybody outside of our relationship to share our pain with, so we didn't. Our saving grace at the time was Andy's ability to speak normally. His voice was my teacher when I had to learn to do the things he used to do. It was the primary way he expressed himself and was one of the only ways we could access our previous life. We talked together and remembered our long romance and adventurous lives. We laughed as I shared stories about my daily activities. One morning, while he was sitting in his chair, shaking like crazy, instead of going for a run like he did most mornings of his life before Parkinson's, he said, "Honestly, this is the worst aerobic workout ever. I never stop shaking and I burn calories like mad, but there is no benefit." His courage and strength existed in his voice. It was a balm to my spirit and connected us in our love. Living for this way for many years takes a toll. In our culture, we don't have a natural way to express the pain we suffer, so usually it stays silent. It is not a peaceful silence, though, because unexpressed trauma causes long-term harm. I recently learned, after Andy regained much of his ability to live independently, how significantly I had repressed my own needs during his battle. My own deepest life force was hidden and hard to find. It made sense. During those hard years, I barely had time to take care of all I was responsible for doing, much less express my own suffering. At the time, I didn't have a welcome place to go and express these difficult feelings. It never felt right to intrude on my parents' or siblings' lovely lives with my own messy, unattractive pain. I don't know what would have happened had I been able to talk to them openly. This is not a judgment against them. I know I am not alone in keeping hard times to myself. And now I've learned that all that inward containment can become poison over time, if not expressed. During this period, I was comforted by 3 people who unexpectedly stepped forward and stood with me at the gates of sorrow where I was stuck. My friend since childhood, Nubia, began to give us money. It was such a needed gift that each time it made me cry. During those hard years, she deposited significant funds into our account that allowed us to try new treatments, help our kids, and live more securely. I felt seen, recognized, and loved. Our friends and neighbors also stepped up and helped. Marianne and Chris and Day and Iris were 2 young couples who lived in our neighborhood. "Are you and Chris available to come over and feed Andy 2 times a day all next week?" I once asked Marianne over the phone. "I have work and need help, but I'll have pre-made all the food. It will need to be warmed up, though. I'm hoping $13 an hour is enough." "We can definitely do that, Michelle, but we don't want to be paid. We love Andy and don't consider spending time with him to be work," Mar replied. I cried over the pure friendship she offered. My dad relentlessly pushed us toward trying to get benefits from the VA. It took years. Without his encouragement, I wouldn't have persisted. At night, when I couldn't sleep, I prayed, and I knew many others were praying for me and Andy. God's love brought peace to my soul, but given that I was living on earth in human form with my sick and disabled husband, I also needed material, pragmatic help for our physical, mental, and emotional needs. When people offered us help, we received so much more than the money, time, or advice they gave. We received the gift of feeling connected. I have since approached my own healing with the same care I gave Andy during those years. I have learned to pay careful attention to who I give my precious energy to and when it is best to sit with it myself. I use natural treatments and have strengthened my life force through conscious deep breathing, quiet times, rest, flower remedies, and protecting myself from helping when it is not the best choice for me. There is much suffering in this world and many people who have been hurt more deeply than I. To those people, I bow down in humble respect and hope that they have given themselves time to heal and integrate the suffering into a life that includes joy. It is clear to me now that every person who has sacrificed a part of their life to another or who has sustained a trauma in any way needs to regain balance and find expression for the pain they felt. In 2015, when Andy really started to feel better, we proceeded much as we had during our most difficult years, by living the best lives we could design and staying present. As with many challenges, the remedy helping us towards our best life was within. Our awareness of our pain would now be balanced with the reality of our joy. This story is about us discovering through trial and error what Parkinson's treatments worked and what didn't. I share how we found our way through sickness and into wellness.